There ain't nothing wrong with me that you can't fix. There ain't nothing wrong with
Hi, it's Brad Maule with Made in Nacogdoches. Today's special guest is Philip Blackburn. Now, this is the way I know him. He and his wife, Mitzi, walk past our house. We pet their dogs. We talk to them. He's a great friend. And he loves Nacogdoches. I think he's a Ben. We'll find out here in a minute. But he's very interesting, a physicist, a former professor at SFA. I can't tell you some other stuff that he does, but he's a wonderful friend of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, Philip Blackburn. Hi, Philip.
Thank you, Brad.
How would you introduce yourself like a real?
Well, I am a Ben, and I found out recently that I'm also a BAM, a B-A-M.
What is
so I'm
that?
a Ben BAM. So I was born in Nacogdoches and born at Memorial.
Oh,
When I got involved with the hospital district, I got to meet a lot of the people who had worked at Memorial Hospital for decades, and they have a big camaraderie up there. And so if you were born at Memorial Hospital, that puts you into another category. So I'm a BAM also.
So I've never heard BAM before.
Yes, Ben BAM.
Nice. You just need one more set of initials. And
Right.
yeah. So, well, you brought up Memorial Hospital. Tell me about Memorial Hospital.
Well, I was sitting there kind of minding my own business, and I get a phone call from the mayor, and he asked me to run for the hospital district board and see if I could, do something at the hospital district to save Memorial Hospital. So I took on the challenge. I had been asked once before to run for the hospital district board, probably about maybe 10 years before. I was very tied up with my radio tracking transmitters, as you know. And so I didn't have time, and I recommended Sean Hightower. And so Sean Hightower was actually the person that I replaced on the board.
Okay.
And I asked Sean, I says, how much are they paying? He says, oh, you're going to make 4 times what I'm making. So I got all excited about it. And then I got sworn in, and well, how much am I getting paid for that? Well, it's 0. So 4 times 0 is 0. So I don't get paid anything. So I came in and just started looking at the situation and realized pretty quickly, I have a graphic if I can show you.
Yeah. And first of all, kind of tell us, people may not know, what is the problem with Memorial?
Yeah, it's underfunded.
Underfunded.
And that's what I saw with this graph right here. That's the net position of Memorial Hospital starting in 2009, going to 2024. And you can see right there, it has a spot where it kind of goes into a nosedive. Well, that was the beginning of Obamacare in 2010.
Wow.
And the government, cut funding for Medicare, Medicaid. Well, that makes up pretty much the majority of the patients there.
So is that when it started going down?
That's when it started going downhill. And so, a graph like that really speaks to me. Like I say, I'm a physicist, mathematician. And so I started digging into it. Yes, that's the place was under the statute that created the hospital district. It was designed to run on property taxes. And at that time I got on the board, we weren't levying a property tax, 0. And so we were actually getting the 1% sales tax. They had an election back in 1990. And the way the law was for that election, the name of the law was, a mechanism to lower ad valorem tax. In other words, this was a way that everyone has been complaining about property taxes forever. Mm-hmm. And so they started this deal where you could add on to your local sales tax to get money to the government entity so you could lower the property taxes you were levying.
And the hospital wasn't getting any property taxes.
No,
is
at
that
that
right?
time in 1992 is when we had the election. We were levying about $800,000 a year in property taxes. But at that time in 1992, the 1% sales tax was $3 million. And so that's what drove the property tax down to 0. They didn't feel comfortable levying a property tax, when they were getting $800,000 and then they were going to start getting $3 million on top of that. They just didn't feel comfortable still continuing with the property tax because they'd gotten so much extra income in the form of the 1% sales tax. So they just turned off the property tax.
Was the $3 million back then in 92 enough?
I think, evidently, because they were only getting $800,000 in property taxes, and that's what that graph. There was no problems until 2010 and the start of Obamacare. They were in the red, in the black, quite a bit. So that told me that, and I looked around the state. I think there may only be one other hospital district in the state of Texas that only has sales tax. and doesn't have either property tax and or property tax and sales tax. The city gets the other 1% of the sales tax, and they have property tax. So the city has property tax and sales tax. A lot of other hospital districts, they either run completely on property tax or they have property tax and some sales tax. There was only maybe one other, and I'm not sure about that, if there is one other, that only gets sales tax. And so the bad thing about sales tax is that it's consumer sales tax, okay? Most of the sales tax in this community is generated by consumer, purchases. And the inflation for that is, pretty small compared to the inflation in the healthcare industry.
So the amount people were spending one year is not going up very much the next year?
That's right.
I'm a real layman here.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Inflation and just normal inflation is much lower than the inflation in the healthcare industry. And so you're latched on to a source of revenue that is not keeping up with the rise of cost in your field.
And healthcare has gone just straight up pretty much.
So that was a bad thing. This is evident when you do your property tax worksheet. We as a hospital district can increase our property taxes each year by 8% without the voters voting on that. That's just to keep up with inflation. Whereas the city, in y'all's worksheet, you can only increase it by 3.5%. So that's the difference right there. And so the property tax, as far as it being a mechanism to lower the ad valorem, at some point it was going to run out because the inflation for the healthcare is so much more. And so the only thing I saw is that they should have brought back the property tax sooner. So I had a big effort to bring back the property tax because that's really the only other source of revenue for the hospital district.
That's a very popular stance.
That's the thing.
Right
it's
there.
only gotten worse. I mean, the animosity towards property taxes has gotten even worse since 1992. And so this environment that we're in out here, now I was surprised when I did the research on it to find out that there's like a dozen governmental entities in Nacogdoches County that can levy a property tax. You start adding them up between the city, the county, the school districts. There's more than one in Nacogdoches County. They have these emergency service districts, these ESD things. There's over a dozen entities just in Nacogdoches County that can levy property taxes. So, everybody's getting tired of the property tax, but that's the law, the statute that created the hospital district. That's how we were intended to be funded. Matter of fact, we can levy up to 75 cents per $100, and we were levying zero. And so we've brought it back at a very small rate, 3.632 cents per $100 valuation, and that's going to help kind of bridge the gap. But that was something that I think should have been done shortly after the bottom fell out back in 2010.
So it wasn't like a bunch of people came in and just took all the money or something.
That's what been the thing. Some folks just say, it's just mismanagement. It seems to be the go-to thought. They're just being mismanaged. And to believe that, you'd have to believe that, they were going on this positive thing until 2010, and they just woke up one morning and said, we're just going to start mismanaging and just run this thing into the ground. I mean, that graph, there's been numerous CEOs over those years. They even brought in some firms to manage the hospital, that CHC. 2 or 3 times they were brought in, and they had the benefit of having more buying power because you were being part of a system, and they lost money during that time. You just couldn't make up for the cuts in the Medicare, Medicaid that was happening. And then the insurance companies, they didn't help much either because they started lowering their reimbursements to try to match Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, it's a very tough environment out there. And on top of all that, Texas didn't expand Medicaid. That didn't help things much. So it just created a real environment. And looking back, there's been like 25 hospitals in Texas that have failed since the implementation of Obamacare. And almost all of them were in East Texas. So we weren't immune from that effect. The hospital districts that weathered that storm were able to increase their property taxes, the good old property taxes, Okay. And so that's why I fought really hard to get the property tax going again, because that is really the only other source of revenue we had access to that we were entitled to under the law. I mean, we were designed to run on that. And the other thing about sales tax, because I hear a lot of things in these political campaigns how they want to do away with property taxes altogether. And when you start looking at the sales tax, like right now, our sales tax for the hospital district is down like $1 million. It's grown since '92. There is the growth, the inflation for consumer. It has grown over the years since 1992. Right now, the sales tax is like $10 million instead of the $3 million it started at in '92. So inflation, it has risen with inflation, but it should be 11 or 12. So our sales tax is actually down. People just aren't buying as much, maybe because of the economy or whatever. So if you were going to get rid of the property tax and replace it with something, i.e. like sales tax, it's a very unstable source of revenue. I mean, you have no control over it. It's purely based on people going out and buying things. Whereas with the property tax, you actually can levy a certain amount, and you get like 98, 99% of the amount you levy. Because I guess, you don't want your property to go into foreclosure because you're not paying your property tax. There's kind of like the stick there that, oh, yes, you're going to pay your property tax. Whereas with sales tax, you have no influence over that. Although you might can tell, oh, people go buy local or something like that, but maybe they go out of town to buy their things. Yeah. You have no control over it. And so it would be next to impossible to create a budget that if your only source of revenue was the sales tax.
So can Nacogdoches handle 2 hospitals?
That's the thing. When we were looking at the problems with the hospital district, I asked a lot of questions, and what I was able to determine is that we were a lot of similarity there with SFA. Stephen F. Austin was like one of the last universities in the state that wasn't part of a system. Right. Because there's all kind of benefits to being part of a system. In the healthcare field, for example, the supplies that you're buying, if you're a part of a system, you have much more buying power, so you're getting better prices on your supplies. You can get better deals with the insurance companies. Now you're a bigger thing. You can negotiate a better contract with the reimbursement from insurance companies, just on and on and on. You can actually have centralized functions like billing and all this kind of thing for all of the hospitals within the system. It's a centralized thing, whereas a single hospital, you have to have all these things at this one hospital. So it was making a lot of sense to be a part of a system, and so that had been explored before. And the problem was all the systems that would come in and look at our situation in Nacogdoches County, it was like, y'all are a 1.5 hospital county and you have 2 hospitals. And so that inhibited our ability to find a system to partner with, because if a system came in and partnered with the hospital district and ran Memorial Hospital, they would be competing against another system that was here in a 1.5 hospital county. They had no desire to do that. And I think that also wasn't beneficial to the other system that was here. If they ever wanted to sell their hospital here, that would be a problem for them as long as we were over here flopping around. So it just made sense then for the 2 hospitals in this 1.5 hospital county to cooperate. And so that's what inspired the thing that's happening right now, where the medical center, which is a part of Tenet, is going to lease our facility and run both hospitals. So now you've kind of solved that problem of being a single entity in an environment where everybody else is a part of some kind of system. You don't see single entity hospitals out there.
And so that's happening.
That's happening, yes. The transition date is August the 11th, and it's going to be done in phases. It's taken a little longer than I had anticipated. When I first was talking to Tenet and they were going to lease our building, we have an old computer system down there. I mean, it's from like the 90s. It's a mainframe. And so that's not the way anybody does it anymore. I mean, today, these hospitals, they have a server, all right, but it's cloud-based. And so really all you need is bandwidth at that point. Mm-hmm. And of course, at our hospital, I mean, it's on Mount Street right here in the middle of town. We have plenty of bandwidth in the neighborhood. We can get it, either have it or can get it. And so I didn't think it was going to be much of a problem whenever they came into our hospital, when they start leasing it and actually move into it, that they would have access to their server through the bandwidth that we already have. Turns out their server, the software on it, has to have a new module, custom written for it, software module, just for that campus, and I wasn't expecting that. And it's going to take them a long time to do that. And so actually the transition is going to happen in 2 phases. They're going to come in August the 11th with some just kind of a bare bones thing, kind of basically what we're doing now. And then in November, when they finish writing out the rest of the software, they'll come in with even more, pretty much the rest of it.
So the system was so old at Memorial that you couldn't just climb up in the clouds with the medical.
No, that was an old-based system, and it was so old that no one supports it anymore. I mean, it's really...
So it's sort of like when your iPad needs updating and it's 5 or 6 years old and it goes, I'm sorry.
We're not going to do it anymore.
We just don't do it.
I got a recent thing from my, I have a router on my home computer, and I get this thing from Netgear. I mean, it's not that old. I think it's only maybe 5 years old, and they send me this notice, oh, we're not going to support that anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but here's this new model you can go out and buy. And so if you don't buy the new model, well, then they're not going to be updating the thing. And if someone ever figures out a way to, take advantage of a security flaw on it, then there's not going to be a patch for it. And so you're pretty much forced into upgrading.
Yeah. And they want you on subscriptions these days, seems like. Everything that I do, used to could buy, a writing,
right.
like, I can't think of it right now, but I mean, like Final Draft, you could buy it and it was yours.
Yes.
But now you have to subscribe to it and update it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw Adobe when I got this computer that I have right now, and I wanted full-blown version of Adobe. I wanted Adobe Acrobat so I could take a PDF, edit it, do whatever, not just the reader. And they were moving into this all cloud-based deal, and so in other words, if you didn't have access to the internet, you couldn't even use the program, right? If something happened to your internet, it's down, then you're not even going to be able to access it. And I said, no, I want the disk where it actually has the program on it. I can load it onto my computer. It doesn't matter if a tree falls on a limb, a limb falls on a line down the street and knocks out the internet, which happened about a week ago.
Right.
I can use it anytime I want. So if you have your computer now and all your applications are cloud-based, I mean, at least a little thing goes out and you're not going to have access to that. So it's kind of weird how that...
So tell me again, how much money are you getting paid for all this work?
$0.00.
And you get a little bit of grief from people about it?
Well, I give a joke sometimes when we have our meetings, they'll go on for some period of time. And so the meeting starts like at 5:15. And so it's going to run into dinner time. And so we'll actually have a meal there for the board members. And so I make the I work for food. So that's kind of
what work for food.
Work for food, yeah. So, yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of that. I have heard a couple of the board members say that, some people would criticize something about it, but I really haven't gotten any of that. And you would think I would be the tip of the spear getting that since I'm the president of the board. But I haven't really gotten a lot of that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I just know that when you're in the public eye, a lot of times people don't really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it for free.
Right.
So,
and really, on the contrary, I've gotten a lot of people giving support, for what I'm doing, trying to do, saving the hospital.
What about the retirement system there?
We have.
People were talking about for a long time.
Right. That was my first experience with it. I went to a meeting at the hotel. They were having a meeting for discussing the defined benefit plan. And we have a defined benefit pension plan. And it was created, I guess, way back, maybe back in the, before the 80s, because I have a document that's from the 80s, and it was a revision of the plan. So it had been around even before that. So it's been changed, amended over the years. And what I found out going into this and this plan is that every hospital district that has one of these plans has either already gotten rid of it or is trying to. Because what's in vogue today are the 401ks, 457Bs, those kind of things. And so everyone's moved away from these defined benefit plans, and they're kind of like a buggy whip type thing. And my first meeting that I went to, the board that was in place at the time was holding a meeting where they were going to terminate the plan. In other words,
And we're talking about the employees of Memorial Hospital.
That's right.
Long-term employees.
Worked there for decades.
Yeah.
And, boy, the tension was very thick at that meeting, as you can imagine.
Well, because you're losing all your money.
Right.
You know.
Well, they weren't going to get what they were expecting.
Right.
You know, they were going to get some money. In other words, I think under the law, if you were already getting your distribution, you had already retired and were getting your distribution, that couldn't be lowered. There was a constitutional amendment about that. So they would have to buy annuities for those guys. But everyone else, you were going to get some percentage of what you thought, and you were just going to get cash, you know, just a cash payout. And so I didn't think that was very good. And it really hit home for me because I'm on the TRS. I worked at SFA and retired from SFA. So I get teacher retirement system. And I can just imagine one morning if I get a call and they say, "Oh, Philip, you know, we're terminating that plan and we're just going to send you a check." That wouldn't go over very well with me. So I kind of, you know, doing as you have them doing to you, I kind of felt that, you know, that's not the way we should be doing this. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to run for the board as well, was to see if that situation could be resolved. And we're working on that. And I think we submitted to the Pension Review Board. That's a state agency a board that monitors these pension plans by the governmental entities in the state. And it's called the Funding Soundness Restoration Plan. You have to have all these things have to be really technical now. This just isn't any ORES. This is a Funding Soundness Restoration Plan. And it starts out because I asked, this is one of the reasons I think why people are trying to get away from these. I asked our actuary, our system right now is closed. In other words, the new employees today do like 401, 457Bs, you know. There's no new members being added to our defined benefit plan. It is closed. So we have a bucket of money there, and it's just to service the members that are in there now. There's about almost 1,000, okay? So we're not taking on any new members. And I asked the actuary, I says, well, how long are we going to be married to this thing? He said, about another 80 years. And so you got to figure some of the people in that defined benefit paper that started working there maybe right when they got out of high school or something. They were young, you know? Uh-huh. And so, and life expectancy increases as you go along. I mean, I think the fastest growing segment of the population are the centennials. And so you're going to have people living over 100 years, 80 years from now. And so I was going, man, that's a long time. So, we've got a restoration plan in place that we will start paying in. I think the first payment is due in 27, almost $1 million. And so we're going to start paying in. In other words, the money that's in there now isn't enough to pay out the distributions all the way out. The bucket of money that's in the fund is going to go down with time because
it's making money now or just...
Well, it's not making enough to pay the distributions.
Right.
Actually, though, right now it's making more than enough, but, you know, on average, it won't. You know, the returns right now are very good. So... but when it goes into the bear territory, it's not very good. So you look at averages. And so if you had a defined benefit plan like ours, we have right around $30 million. If you were to pay it out over the course of 80 years until the last person that's in that thing passes away and you still had $30 million, you did something wrong. It's designed to where it's supposed to go down with time until, the theoretical best case scenario for getting it right on the nose would be the last payment going out right when the last person passes away. It's impossible to do, but so you want to overshoot it to some degree. But it's supposed to go down. It's just the problem is it's going down faster than it should. So we're going to have to start supplementing it. And so that's the supplement, somewhere around $1 million. If we supplement it about $1 million each year, we will catch up. And over the course of time, it will be able to be funded 100%.
So, but put it on a human level. If you've worked there 30 or 40 years, and then somebody calls you and say, hey, guess what? That retirement you paid into is no longer there. We're just going to give you a little check.
And they were freaking out.
And I don't blame them.
Yeah, I heard people were selling their car. People were going out and looking for work. I'm talking people in their 70s. And I said, no, we're not going to do something like that.
Yeah.
For one thing, some people were looking at terminating the plan. It was just pure business to them. This is a business decision. I go, well, there's more to it than a business decision. We have a brand. If you're not going to do what you said you were going to do, then you have no credibility. And so, I thought the best thing to do was to fight and save not only the hospital district, but also the defined benefit plan. They were kind of really joined at the hip. And you would have to imagine that if the hospital district were to go down, file bankruptcy and actually go away or whatever, then the defined benefit plan would stand no chance. I mean, that's the hospital district is who funds it. Yeah. And so they're really kind of joined at the hip, those two problems. And
if you have a heart.
That's right. Yeah, if you're just all business and you go, oh yeah, we'll just here's something we need to cut, then that's just no good. Yeah.
Well, especially because I went to a few of those meetings and you meet those people and you're like, well, it's not business. This is about people's entire lives being dedicated to something. And I've had personal experience with Memorial, and the friendliness, the way they take care of you is incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing place.
That was
There's
my
a
reaction
there.
to.
Were you born in Memorial?
Yes, I'm a BAM.
Okay.
So these are the folks who took care of our loved ones, took care of us, and now they need our help. I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm going to work really hard to make sure they get what they expect. I mean, what they deserve. So that's what I'm working towards. And and no one on the current board is entertaining that idea of terminating the plan. If there may be at some point the ability to buy annuities for people, well, that's giving them what they were supposed to get anyway.
Right.
It's more expensive than I thought it was going to be. When I first checked on it, the number I was getting was you maybe had to go 5% above the 100%, so you could buy the annuities, but it's actually going to be more than that. So, and there's some people in the plan that maybe they didn't work there for very long. You could be vested, I think, maybe after 5 years. Don't quote me on that. At SFA, it was 10 years.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look in there, but it was a short period of time to be vested. And maybe you went to work somewhere else, but you're vested in it and you don't have that much money in there. And maybe they don't want to wait until they're 65 to start drawing a benefit. You could pay them an amount of cash to buy them out of the plan. So if you look at some of that, you may be able to do it maybe for 110% or so. I don't know. We're exploring that. We're looking at all the different possibilities, because for me, I would like to settle the issue. Because with the current board, like I'm saying, we're not entertaining the idea of terminating the plan or whatever. If there was the possibility to transition to something else, like cash buyouts for those that want the cash, they don't want to wait until they're 65, and then buy annuities for everyone that's either already getting distributions or will get distributions in the future. That would be something I would entertain, that idea, because I don't know what a future board might do. You never can tell what's going to happen in the future.
So how's the transition? Is it going to, from Medical Center and Memorial coming together, is it going to lift Memorial up, or what's it going to do?
Yeah, it's, because now you're getting the benefit of being cooperating with the system.
Okay.
So you have, more, they're going to run our facility, that system will. So they have all the benefits of what they have across town as far as their buying power, their contracts with insurance companies, the billing, things like that's off-site. The computer's off-site. You don't have to have an IT department there like we have that's managing a server when the server's in a cloud. So just all the pros of the cost-cutting from that. And so that's all the plus thing. And so we're there to basically, as the landlord, maintain the building. Now, there's a lot of deferred maintenance on the building because of the economic problems we've had over the years. So we're still going to be, catching up on the deferred maintenance for some time.
So I'm trying to be a little bit devil's advocate here, but what if somebody says, well, so the other hospital's taking care of Memorial now, right, so you've got all this extra money coming in from the sales tax.
Right.
Are y'all just going to take vacations? What are you going to do with it?
Right. Well, you start adding up all the bills, and the 1% sales tax right now has a lien against it because that's what was used to back the bond for the expansion. It was like a $50 million expansion that they did back in 2015, 2016, 2017. It was like 3 different bonds.
Was that legal to do?
Yeah.
Pledge
Yeah,
it?
you could use the 1% sales tax for anything you could use the property tax for. So typically when you do a bond for a building project, if you are able to get property taxes, then you would do like a general obligation bond election, and you would back that bond with property taxes. But since we were getting the 1% sales tax, that is a legitimate thing you can do with it, is you can use the revenue from the 1% sales tax to service a bond.
So what did they do with that $50 million in 2015?
The new wing at the south end of the building, all that area there, the emergency room, the labor and delivery, surgery, that whole new wing on the south end of the campus was built back in 2015. That's when it started, the bond. 2015, 2016, 2017. They did 3. There was a big one for the building. Then they issued another bond where they bought the equipment. And then there was a third bond that was even smaller. I think it was miscellaneous stuff. But
So was that chart going down at that time, and they did that anyway? I'm not trying to place blame. I'm just asking.
and that was one of my criticisms I had at previous, if, it's Monday morning quarterbacking. They thought that was one of the things that might get them out of this decline. Okay, was the thinking. My preference for them would have been to have issued a general obligation bond. I mean, we had the authority to have a bond election and have a bond that's backed with property taxes. We can do bond elections just like the city can. I'm not sure why they didn't go that route. They had enough revenue coming in from the 1% sales tax to service the bond. Right now, the way it works is the 1% sales tax is collected. It goes straight from the state comptroller to the bond trustee, which is
Doesn't go into y'all's
doesn't go to us
funds
directly. It goes to the trustee first, and he pulls out $3.5 million from it to service the bond, and we get the difference. And so that's the arrangement that was set up in order to back that bond with the 1% sales tax. So that all stays the same. I mean, that thing doesn't pay out for probably like another 20 years. Okay, so there's a lien against the sales tax for the bond, so that stays in place. What's also part of that graph, I mean, if you're losing money, how much money are you putting into the maintenance of the bill? I mean, there's just deferred maintenance out the wazoo that we have to catch up on. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to take a long time. So, you're in a pretty deep hole. That graph, that's minus $30 million, okay? So you're starting out at minus $30 million. Yeah. There's something about the graph that I don't agree with that makes it, I mean, it's bad as it is, but it's not as bad as it looks because there's nothing in the way the accountants, these auditors that audit our books and create this graph, there's nothing in the system for giving us any credit for the 1% sales tax. They just show it as income, like manna from heaven just comes in. I think that's a problem because for me, when I look at that graph, another thing that strikes me in addition to seeing that it's going down like crazy is that nothing could withstand that kind of loss and still be in existence. I mean, just think you went from plus 40 million down to almost minus 40 million. How could you still be open?
Yeah.
And the answer is really that we're not given any credit for the 1% sales tax as it being an asset. Imagine how much money you would have to have set aside in some kind of fund generating revenue that would generate you $10 million a year and be increasing. In other words, you're not pulling out because we started at $3 million. So it's going to keep on going up with inflation. I mean, how much money would you have to have? It'd be a couple of $100 million.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to be heavy into bonds. You couldn't put anything in the market or it'd be like this. I mean, yes, it's down $1 million, but it's never tanked like you might expect if you have a fund invested in the stock market, maybe 60% in the stock market, 40% in the bonds. You understand how, I mean, you can go a year where you actually lose money.
Yeah.
Well, it's never been like that. So we've always had income from it. And it's varied a little bit. I complain about it just because it's $1 million down, but it's never been zero. And so you would have to have $250 million set aside. Whereas there's no way for the auditors to give us that kind of credit. And so really our net position, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is much higher than what it's shown, because you've got an asset out there that's generating you revenue, and that's not even on our books. Matter of fact, the way the books are shown, another problem I have with the audit is it shows us getting the money first and paying the bond, and that's not the way it's actually happening. I mean, it goes to the trustee, and then we get the difference. So really our books should show that we're getting that difference, the $6 million. And there should be some provision. But, governmental accounting, they have all these things. They call them GASB, G-A-S-B. There's no GASB for incorporating the value of this 1% sales tax, because you think around, how many people even get the 1% sales tax? And then try to figure out how to value that as an asset. There's just no provision for it in their accounting methods for that. But that's what explains why we're still here. I mean, because if you just look at that graph, it's improbable.
How do you stay open?
How could you even still be open after losing that kind of position over time? So, yeah, it's not quite as bad as it looks, but it's really bad. I mean, because all that time you were losing, that's an average loss of $5 million a year. If you're losing $5 million in a given year, you're not just thinking about taking care of the maintenance of the building. So we have a list as long as my leg of things that we need to address in coming years to bring the building up, because now it's going to be utilized much more than we were utilizing it now that we have this lease agreement.
Because you just weren't paying it before, you didn't have any money.
Well, you got a couple of wings up there that's just not even being used. I mean, when they built the new labor and delivery part, the old labor and delivery part's still in the building, and it's just being used for storage. Same thing with the surgery.
So will there be new energy and life around there when this transition takes place?
Yes, the place is going to, it looks like a ghost town now, but now it's going to come back to life. Yeah, and I really look forward to seeing what it looks like a year from now.
Yeah.
A year from now, it's going to be, back like it used to be.
Sure. Okay. So what was Nacogdoches like when you were a kid?
Well, it was pretty sleepy, I grew up on the south side of town over on Leek Street, and I don't remember getting out of there a whole lot. Yeah, we had a fenced-in backyard. We were kind of like caged animals, me and my brother and sister, and we would run around the backyard. We had basketball, football, bicycles.
Did you have a backyard or a little backyard?
It was a small, for me as a little kid, it looked pretty big.
Yeah.
But I think the whole lot was less than an acre, so it wasn't that big. But, we had stuff to play with, and, we didn't get much farther away from the house than that. I mean, there was a convenience store maybe about a quarter mile away. Sometimes we'd walk down there, ride our bike, but it wasn't like we just roamed,
You weren't free range?
No, we weren't. We were, kind of had a helicopter mom, and we were.
You did? Oh, okay.
We were in the backyard and watched. And so, I went to school through the public school system. So actually, I started out in kindergarten at First Baptist Church. So and back then, the school system didn't have kindergarten. So there was kindergarten at First Baptist. Then I went to Fredonia Elementary there on South Fredonia. Then at that time, 6th and 7th grade went to Emline Carpenter. And I'm talking about the old Emline Carpenter, the one they just tore down.
Oh, okay.
I think it was off of McElroy Street or something over there. So we did 6th and 7th grade there. Then the bigger campus where the high school was also had 8th grade. So
is that TJR?
Yeah. Okay. Well, they've renamed it several times. Back then, the buildings that they tore down, which were on the north end of the campus, kind of next to the cafeteria, they just tore them down recently.
Right.
That was what we called TJR back then.
Oh, okay.
And the high school was in the white building. That's what we called it, the white building. I think they call that TJR now. It's maybe it's a Chamberlain building, something like that. And there was another building on the campus. It was red, and they called it the red building. Yeah, they're very creative, these people. Yeah, there's a red building and a white building. Yeah. So, the red building was maybe a 2 or 3 story building that became, old and unsafe. They tore it down.
I think I've seen that in that movie, the 1938
Oh,
footage.
that's even another one.
It was a big, tall, or maybe that's not it.
Yeah, that's a different building they tore down. Yeah, that was the Central School building. That was between
beautiful looking.
Between the white building and the old university building was a building. So, I never saw that one because they tore that down way back. Yeah. But I was around when they tore down the red building. Matter of fact, I think they collected a lot of the bricks and were selling them as a fundraiser. So the 8th grade was there, what we called TJR, which was the 2-story building. It had all the windows. That's what's funny about, and a lot of times you see these initiatives to build something new, and the reason for building is because, this is the way we're doing it now. We don't do it like this. And that was some of the stuff that was going around. They analyzed the psychology of the kids. Oh, they need to be able to see out all these windows, and all this kind of thing. And so, man, there were just windows. The whole side of the room was just nothing but these big, huge windows. And each classroom had a door going to the outside. There was no hallway, that went into all the It was like,
now that's dangerous.
It was like totally different, but this is what we need to do because the way y'all are doing it, it's bad on the psyche of the kids or whatever. So they build all this stuff, and then you fast forward 50 years, they're tearing it all down because it's unsafe. It took them 50 years to figure out, well, we can't make these things safe. So they tore down the old M-line carpenter. It looked a lot like the TJR. It's just the TJR was 2-story, but it was the same thing. Door to every classroom that opens to the outside, windows all over the place. You can't make them safe.
Like a motor court motel or something.
And so, the 8th grade was there, the TJR 8th grade, and then the 9th through 12th was the white building. And I was in the class of 1979. So that was like the last class that attended that old campus. They were building the new campus out at the Loop in Appleby Sand, the new high school. When I was in, matter of fact, when I played football, the field house was already out there. I can remember when they were building the stadium, because they took the bleachers from the old SFA stadium and transported them out there to make the new stadium that's out at the high school.
I've heard that before.
I think they moved some of those pieces of metal with a helicopter, if I remember right.
Wow.
And so they moved that stadium out there. They were working on that in it had to be the mid-'70s.
Was University Drive out there at that time?
Not all the way to the Loop.
Yeah.
But, it stopped there at Austin Street. And so, the new high school was under construction, and we already had the field house, for athletics, and the stadium out there before they built the high school. Because when I was playing football in the 9th grade, we would go out there to the field house out at the new campus. And they built the high school out there and finished it. I think they were a little late. So maybe if the class of 80 attended any classrooms in the old white building where I was, it wasn't for very long. I can't remember if they went there shortly because they weren't quite finished with the new one. But they were the first class to graduate from the new campus, the new high school out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what restaurants and stuff like that? Where did you eat? What did you do as a kid?
What was funny, I have really good memories of this. There was a restaurant downtown. It was Shepherd's. Sam Shepherd had a restaurant. Yeah, I think it may be there where Texas Size Bling is. There's been several things in there. Right next to LaDonna Simpson Realty. Yeah, that was a restaurant at one time. And, of course, after church, it was a big thing for everyone to go out, Sunday for a meal. And we would go there. And I remember that Coach Marshall Brown would bring his basketball team in there. And this is back whenever, they had a really good basketball team. And this is back in the 60s, late 60s. And those guys, they were like 7 feet tall. And you can imagine, I'm in elementary school, 4th or 5th grade, and you're seeing these basketball players that are like 7 foot tall. And I remember the names. We were really big on supporting SFA as a community. The sports. It was George Johnson, Harvey Hustetler, the Paulnett twins. I remember Snake Silas and all those guys. And so Surrey Oliver. Yeah, they had a really good team. And there they were in that restaurant. And it was funny because years later I would go to that restaurant before it finally closed. And it's like, man, this thing's a lot smaller than I remember it. But I was just a little kid.
Yeah.
And it looked like this huge restaurant when you walk in there. And you go back in that room where they would all be at this one big table. And it was like, God, you almost have claustrophobia.
Land of giants there.
Yeah. But back then, it was really dramatic. So,
what kind of food did they serve?
It was just, home cooking type stuff. And I remember the biscuits they used to bring around. They would bring them fresh out of the oven. They'd kind of have them like a big kind of a bucket. With a big napkin on the top of it, and they'd pull the napping bag. You get that hot biscuit out, it was a roll, hot rolls. And
I can't long for those days.
Yeah, that was a highlight of the Sunday, was going to eat at Shepherd's Restaurant after
So
church.
what was a typical, like, I don't know, what kind of food did you eat as a kid? Like mac and cheese kind of thing, or what was it like?
You mean like at the house? You know, it was,
what'd your mom fix?
a lot of hamburgers, a lot of, steak.
Did you have any tang?
No, never got the tang.
Okay.
What the weird thing that we have a lot of times for lunch now, I'm talking about, what we had for dinner. For breakfast, it was always scrambled eggs and bacon, and a roll. But for lunch, we would have this weird stuff. It was like olive loaf. I mean, it's kind of like the mystery meat.
I know what that is. That was a tough one to eat, actually. I was like, ooh.
I mean, I don't know what all was in there, but it was olive loaf, pimento loaf. You'd have all this loaf stuff, and you'd have the package that would have like all these different things in there, all this mystery meat. You might could have some turkey or some ham, but we had a lot of the loaf and Vienna sausage.
Yeah,
we ate a lot of Vienna sausage. We weren't rich, as and I remember we used to take the Vienna sausage and you'd like cut them in half lengthwise, and you would like make your sandwich and just line those things up in there. Yeah, it was
kind of like Spam a little bit, I guess.
That was the thing. We did the Vienna sausage, but my mother wasn't big on Spam, so we never had any Spam.
Okay.
I never had any Spam until I went to Hawaii. It was kind of crazy.
Well, it's different in Hawaii. It's kind of a treat.
You have like a cookbook, where you can do everything you can imagine with Spam. But for dinner, we would have things like that: hamburgers, steak. Sometimes we'd have pork chops. My mother would make these fried salmon patties. That was kind of very...
Yeah, my grandmother used to make
get
those.
a little can of salmon and make these patties out of it and fry them. So, yeah, that was very cool. We didn't eat out a whole lot.
Yeah,
because
right at home.
Yeah. There was a restaurant around the corner from us, John's Restaurant, that was operating. That was on the corner of South Street and Lane Drive. And we ate there quite a bit, too. And it was...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I've heard about Greens, like a place down there in that Park and Richardson area. Have you ever heard of a restaurant being down there, the Green Lantern or something like that?
No, I never have.
I may have made that up. Sorry.
Around Richardson Street?
Yeah. Park and Richardson.
I don't know. There could have been. We didn't get across town that much.
Right. Maybe somebody out there knows that. So, call us or write us or something.
Yeah. My dad would take us to the SFA Lumberjack football games, and I have a lot of recollections of that. As a matter of fact, I saw Rick Scarborough not too long ago, and I was relating one of the games. They were down on the goal line. It was like, first and goal. And I remember this player, I think his name was Andy Hopkins. And he gets the ball. He was like a fullback, either a halfback, fullback. He was in the the backfield. He runs up to that, and I mean, as soon as they snap the ball, the defense just like collapses and just tries to block it, and it's just like a gridlock right there at the goal line. And he comes up there and does this flip, and does a somersault in the air, and scores a touchdown. And everybody I was just like freaking out. I mean, we were screaming and hollering, but at the same time, we go, "What just happened?" I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And, I remember one game we were playing, I guess we were in the Lone Star Conference or something like that back then. We played different teams. We played like Sol Ross, McMurray State, all these teams that we don't play. It must have been like a Division II or maybe even Division III back then. But we played this one team, I think it was McMurray, and we beat them like 69-3 or something like that. I mean, it started with the kickoff. We won the kickoff, so we were receiving, and they ran it back for a touchdown, and it was all downhill from there. I mean, every time we got our hands on the ball, we scored. I don't think they ever got a first down, or you had very few first downs.
And they had to drive all the way back to Abilene that night.
It was like 60-something-3. I mean, that was a crazy game. So, yeah, we used to go to those games, but, I don't remember doing a whole lot.
Did you go to the drive-in?
No. Never went to drive-in.
There was a drive-in here,
we
wasn't
went
there?
to, sometimes we would go to the theater on Main Street as kids. I don't have much recollection to go into even the SFA theater until years later, like when I was in high school.
Do you have any movies that you remember from back then that were your favorites or anything?
I I don't remember. I remember one of them was like, this is telling you how old you are and the kind of movies you're good. It was like what's Aladdin's Adventures and all this kind of thing. You ever like kid movies?
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of thing.
By the time I got old enough to be interested in going to movies, I couldn't go to the ones I wanted to see, like Saturday Night Fever or something.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, you're not, 18 years old. You can't go. It's rated R. You can't go to this movie.
I have like memories of the bus picked us up and took us to see the 10 Commandments at 10 a.m. in the morning. Like it was a field trip kind of thing.
We never got those. We had field trips. Some of them would be to the campus to see like a symphony or something. I mean, it was weird. I mean, because we didn't have
that was as close to culture as we got.
We weren't just real interested in symphonies as little kids, And so here we are at SFA, watching this symphony. No, not so much of that.
Did you roller skate?
Yeah, I started roller skating, I guess, back somewhere around 5th grade. And that was, like I say, there wasn't a whole lot of things to do in town. There was a skating rink. There was a bowling alley, but I'm just a kid. I wasn't interested in going bowling. Yeah. So I was attracted to doing skating, and it was almost like church out there because there was several of us. I mean, we were there every time the doors were open. I mean, we were there on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Friday nights. Every time the place was open, we were there skating because, entertainment was pretty limited back then.
Yeah, what did it cost to get in to skate back then? Do you remember?
Oh, it was cheap. It had to be like 50 cents or less. I mean, it wasn't very expensive. Depending on where you had your own skates or not. And that was the thing. I did get my own skates back then and kept upgrading them. I remember the first pair of skates I had actual ball bearings in them. Because the precision skates were actually a newfangled thing back then. So I'm talking in this is, I guess this would be 73, 74, somewhere back in there, maybe early 70s. So the precision bearings was kind of a newfangled thing. The roller skates had always had these ball bearings, and they had like these cones and this nut that was on the axle that kind of held all that together. And if the nut got a little loose or loosened up, then these ball bearings just go everywhere. And I remember one time I was skating and the nut had come off and the ball bearings just go everywhere out on the skate floor. So it was pretty crazy.
Did you go everywhere also? Like,
I went down. Well, that still had, 7 other wheels. So I didn't actually fall, but, the wheel come off. Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Did you ever have inline skates? I remember that was a
that
big deal.
was something that came out long after I'd been skating.
90s or something like that.
I've never been on a set of inlines. I could probably skate on a pair of them because I have been on ice skates before.
Well, I was going to ask, have you ever ice skated?
Yeah, I was able to ice skate. It kind of hurt my ankles a little bit. I think some of that may have been the function of the skates. I remember when I first got it, because I didn't have my own pair, so I had to rent them. And I set the skates down, and the boots just flopped over. There was just no support. And so for a beginner, I think maybe I should have gotten some better skates that had more ankle support. But, yeah, I was able to ice skate, so I think I could probably skate on the inlines. But since I cut my teeth on the quads, that's why. And I still skate to this day. I just skated Saturday night. It's good exercise. I do it for exercise more than anything else. My favorite part of skating nowadays is they have a thing called fast skate. And so they play this song, and you can just skate as fast as you can skate for the entire length of the song. It's not like a race. Like they also have races where you line up on a line and you race. No, this is just fast skate. They play this. And so they're always asking me what song I want to hear. And so I say, play a Sweet Child of Mine. That song goes on for like 9 minutes. It's like the longest song I could think of.
You should ask for Inagata Davida or something,
So it's got to be something pretty upbeat. And I really like that song. And so, if you can skate all out for 8 or 9 minutes, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
And so to this day, I can't skate all out for 8 or 9 minutes. I mean, I can probably skate all out for several minutes, as fast as I can skate, but I'll skate pretty fast and maybe just turn it up to, 7 or 8 for a little length of time. Yeah. But it's good exercise if you can prevent breaking every bone in your body. That's the other key to it. At my age, I'm turning 65, July the 10th.
And still skating.
Still skating. So, but I wear a lot of pads, and it's kind of weird. I get to the skating rink, and they open like at 6:30. And I don't get on the floor till 6:45 because I'm over there putting on all my pads. So I've got like the wrist guards, the elbow pads. I've got some knee pads. Then what you can't see is under my shirt, I have on a shirt that football players wear. I ran across this shirt that's got all this padding in just the right places,
Right.
And so that's on underneath my shirt. And then underneath my shorts, I have on hockey shorts. And so in case I, fall into them, I try not to fall.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's unavoidable. If someone trips right in front of you at the last second,
So it takes like 20 minutes to get dressed and 20 minutes to get undressed and all this.
Cuts into all my skating time.
I know.
So I
All
guess
your
I need
regalia. Did you make good grades as a kid?
I did.
What'd you like? What'd you not like?
I was attracted to the science and math. That all started probably in middle school. And, by the time I was in high school, I think I took physics as a freshman, which was kind of crazy. And so I took everything they had back then, and it was, all the science and all the math that was available. And they had quite a bit. I remember they had a class called elementary analysis, which was a weird word. It was basically calculus 1. And so when I did go to SFA as a freshman, I took calculus 1 and got for about half of the semester it was review. I already had all this stuff.
Everybody else, it was hard.
Right. And it was funny because SFA had a deal at the time where you could place out of certain classes, like trig and algebra and all these things. So coming in, starting with calculus 1, I got credit for like 12 hours of courses for that one class, and I made an A. So that was my GPA was pretty high starting out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I took everything they had back then, and I think my average when I graduated was like 97 or something like that, and that was without any weighting. I think weighting it would have been way over, because I always took the advanced classes. If they had an English class, I wouldn't take the regular. I'd take the honors English, and then I would take all the math. That was the weird thing about when I went through high school, was a lot of the times I was in the class with upperclassmen. And so I was hardly ever in a class with my classmates.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of different.
Well, was there anything you were bad at?
Bad at?
Like at school? Like for me, math was just something I needed to get through. It just wasn't. And I want to ask you about that too. Also, what is it that makes your brain scientific or mathematically oriented, and what makes the person's brain, warped and want to be an actor or something? I mean, what happened to me? Was I dropped on my head? Were you dropped on your head?
I don't know. I think some of it's genetics, because it was weird. When I was a freshman in high school, there was this Boy Scout Explorer post, and it was for ham radio. I don't know if you know what ham radio is. If they call it amateur radio. Most people, ham radio is kind of a,
Do you have a handle? What's your handle?
In those, with ham radio, which makes it different than CB radios, you don't have a handle. It's just your name.
Oh,
so it's just Philip. Philip was my handle. It's similar to CB radio, but you get a lot more privileges as far as what you can do with ham radio, and it's actually licensed. I mean, they actually check on that. Whereas with CB radio, most people don't have a license that have a CB radio. Right. You can get a license. You're supposed to get a license, but hardly anybody does. But with ham radio, they kind of police their own. If they ever detect somebody that isn't properly licensed,
I've been told to get off.
They'll turn them into the FCC. I mean, they'll come knock on your door. So there was this Boy Scout Explorer post for ham radio in the 9th grade. And I got interested in that and got into ham radio. Well, it turns out my father had been into ham radio back before World War II.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so my dad, like a lot of guys at that time, World War II, he lied about his age to get in. He was on the farm,
17 years old or something.
Working the plows and all that. And a lot of the guys, the country needed your service. And so they said, oh, yeah, I'm 18. And I think he was 17 maybe when he went in. And actually, he went in before the war started for us. It was before Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. And he took this aptitude test, and he scored high on electronics and radio. And so they put him in this radio school in San Antonio. And he was in that radio school in San Antonio when Pearl Harbor happened. So he was just on that pathway for being into electronics.
And did he teach you that, or did you not even know?
That was the thing. He went in. Back then, they didn't have the Air Force. It was the Army Air Corps. And he was in radar. And, of course, radar was new back then. And he was actually in the advanced radar group. He went all in the Pacific Ocean setting up these radar installations. So he comes out of the military with all this knowledge of electronics, and the electronics industry at that time was in its infancy. And so he taught, I think, some electrical courses over at Angelina Junior College back in the day. But he got into selling insurance at some point and can make more money selling insurance than he could as being an electronics person. And so he kind of went off in that direction and never did much with the electronics. And so when I was growing up as a kid, I never saw anything about electronics around the house. It was all insurance, But when I got into ham radio, I had a ham radio license back before World War II. And
so you never had a radio sitting around for you to play with or anything like that?
Never did. He had a CB radio, but never a ham radio. And so he got back into ham radio when I got into it. And so I'm thinking that maybe some of it is hereditary, And I remember one of the things, when he was in the Army Air Corps, he was stationed at one time over in Warner Robins, Georgia, which is real close to Macon, Georgia. Well, that's where he met my mother. Was in Macon, Georgia. So, of course, he brings her back to East Texas, and we would go to Georgia, pretty much every year, sometimes a couple times a year, to visit the relatives in Georgia. But way back, this is before my time, they started the Air Force Academy, and they were looking for instructors for electronics there, and they called on my dad to come and teach electronics up at the Air Force Academy because he was, he'd been in advanced radar in the Army Air Corps. And he mentioned it to my mom. Oh, yeah, we can go up to Colorado. And then she starts crying. Instead of getting closer to Georgia, we're getting further away. Although as the bird flies, I think it's still about the same distance. It could have been a little further, but it definitely wasn't getting any closer to Georgia. So that got nixed. But, so I think it's probably I inherited it to some degree from my dad, that the way your brain works, the way it's wired up and that kind of thing. And so, because it's always been easy for me.
Well, when you were on ham radio, did you talk to people in across the world or something like that? Or is that all local kind of thing?
Yeah, you started out as a novice, what they call novice. I got into it back when Morse code was mandatory. They kind of relaxed that over the years. And so now you can actually get a ham radio license without knowing Morse code. But when I got started in it, you had to know Morse code. And it was like 5 words per minute. And so when I first got on the air, there was no talking. It was just da, 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 it's Morse code. And then when I got my license so that I could actually talk on the radio, I have an advanced class license. I couldn't put a key up fast enough because just imagine it takes you forever. Even if you get really fast at Morse code, you're 20 words per minute. I mean, you can talk a lot faster than that. So it would take forever. There's some benefits to Morse code, like if there's a lot of interference, you can punch through the interference because it's just a single tone. You're not having voice, where you're trying to recognize words and things. So Morse code is good for punching through interference and things like that. But as far as just talking to people, it takes forever. And so I put it away. But I talked to Australia. I mean, like we're talking now.
So you could talk to people in Morse code? I mean,
and it's weird because we joke about it today that the way communications is being done is digital. So it's just like really fast Morse code. I mean, it's come full circle. I used to hate Morse code, but basically whenever you're talking on your cell phone or even probably on your telephone, the analog is being converted to ones and zeros pretty quick. And so it's almost like, that's what Morse code is, on, off. It's like it's digital. It's either on or it's off. And so it's a combination of on-offs that's going on that is coded. And so current communications is pretty much really fast Morse code. That's what you're
did not know that. I'd never made that.
That's the association. Yes. When you're into it, you kind of see, they just come full circle. This is just really fast Morse code. But as far as speaking to people, even when I was just using code, it was funny. One time I was, we collect what we call QSL cards. A QSL card is, in ham radio, we have Qs. Kind of like what the 10 codes were on CB, what's your 1020? Well, in ham radio, the Q, what's your QTH? That's your location. So you have all these Qs that are short words.
What was your QTH?
It was Leak Street.
Okay, that's where you said, I'm on Leak Street,
Nacogdoches, Texas. Yeah. That's where my license was for. I mean, your license will have your address.
Now, did you ever run into any old not creepy, but grumpy old people are like, what are you doing on here, you young whippersnapper?
Usually whenever there's a young kid on there, it was kind of a new thing for them because there are a lot of retired people that I would talk to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
They just sit on there.
Get off of there.
They call it rag chewing on ham radio. They just sit there and they talk on their ham radio all day, For me, the ham radio, I was really interested in the electronics end of it because I had to build a lot of my own stuff. So that's how I learned how to solder and put things together. And then
Did you get a kit from the store or something?
it was a company called Heath Kit,
Okay.
Heath Company. They had these Heath kits. And so the first radio that I got on the air with was a Heath kit. And what was funny about it was, like I say, they're always changing the laws. When I first got on the air, I was a novice. And so I could only do Morse code, had limited areas in the band that I could speak on or do my code on. And the power was limited to 75 watts. And so the first radio I got, because my only source of income at this time, this is when I was in the ninth grade, was mowing yards and raking leaves.
How much did you get for that?
Yeah, it was kind of limited amount of revenue there. So the only radio I could afford was this thing they called a QRP radio. And QRP stands for low power. Oh. And the maximum power this thing put out was about like a CB. It was like, 4 or 5 watts. But I was competing against people with 75 watts, so it wasn't dramatically a problem. But then they changed the law and they raised the power for novice class up to 250. Well, when they did that, I couldn't get a word in edgewise. I mean, I'm at 5 watts and they're at 250.
Yeah.
And so the next thing I built after I built my radio was a linear amplifier. I needed to get my power out.
Now, did you have directions, instructions?
They
or
had
something?
these, for the linear amplifier, I couldn't afford a kit for that. I'd already maxed out, spent all my money on the radio, So I had this book. It was called Understanding Amateur Radio. And in there was a chapter on this amplifier. And so they had the circuit, a list of all the components, how to build it, and everything. I mean, so you just had to follow the instructions. And so then it became a scavenger hunt. So you had to go around and find all these components. A lot of the components I found, some of them were from junk TVs. Some of them were from people in the community that had some of these parts. There was a guy I met, Basil Barbie, who was kind of a legend in the electronics business in this area. I have to tell you some stories about Basil. But he helped me get some parts. There was a guy in Lufkin, Merle Saxon, that I got some parts from. He was in the radio business. He repaired the radios. He was had a telecommunications license. So I put this radio together. And of course, it didn't work.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
So that's the thing
a
about
couple of screws left over or something, or
that's the thing about this hobby is that you're learning because you put it all together and now it doesn't work. So now you have to really dive into it and figure out what makes it tick and see if you can fix it.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, I mean, because what it was doing, it was what was called self-oscillating. In other words, it's supposed to be an amplifier. It's supposed to take some signal that comes into it and amplify it up. Well, what would happen with this thing, as soon as you turn it on, at some frequency, it would just start operating at this frequency and just oscillate full power. And so kind of like when a PA system goes into feedback, okay? Yeah. So this thing turned out, and it was funny because my neighbor, it was some frequency that was pretty close to a TV station because it wiped out some of the TVs in my neighborhood.
You didn't open people's garages or anything.
Because I was watching Days of Our Lives, all of a sudden the TV goes sideways, because back then there wasn't a whole lot of cable around. And so, I had to figure out why this thing was going into self-oscillation.
Did you know what self-oscillation was at that moment?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I'd read enough about it and learned enough about it that I could and so I was able to figure out how to fix that and get it working. And so you learn a lot about it. And that's one of the things I saw in the hobby that's not there today like it was when I got started, was that people just go out and buy a radio,
Yeah.
and they don't even own a soldering iron.
Right.
And you're going, man, y'all are really missing out on this because, I mean, that's part of the hobby is that you learn this stuff. Learn what
There's no
makes it
internet
tick.
to look up stuff either back when you were doing
Right.
it.
Just had books.
Yeah.
You could get books about the topic. There's a group called the ARRL, Amateur Radio Relay League. And there's just a whole library of books that you can order. And that's the thing about a ham radio, that it was a very diverse area. There's guys, get this, that will, the radio signal, we have a big range of frequencies that we can operate on, some down to like lower than a megahertz and then way up past gigahertz, like X-band, K-band. We get up there 24 gigahertz. If you can get the equipment to operate on those bands, you can operate on those bands. So what happens in ham radio is up until around 30 megahertz, the signal bounces off the ionosphere. And so that kind of is great in a lot of cases if you're trying to talk a long distance away. Like when I was talking to Australia, like we're talking now, it was operating what they call skip.
The pine trees didn't get in the way?
At that frequency, it didn't bother them too much.
Okay.
So it just goes up, hits the ionosphere, and bounces down. And I didn't know which way to turn the antenna because, it's on the other side of the planet. Now, when you get up past 30 megahertz up to 50 megahertz, it doesn't bounce anymore. It just goes on into the ionosphere. And so the range of your communications is limited by the curvature of the Earth. And that's why, like your TV stations and radio stations, if you're traveling and you're listening to a radio station, after you get 100 miles away, you're going to lose it. Yeah. Because it just goes right over your head and doesn't bounce off anything. So that's how you can have a lot of things on the same frequency, because when you're up on those higher frequencies, it's because it's not going to interfere with everybody else around the globe because you're limited by pretty much line of sight. Well, that's not good enough for some people, and so they figure, well, what can I bounce this signal off of? And so they have people that will build these antennas, this is in ham radio, and bounce the signal off the moon, okay?
Oh, wow.
Or bounce it off an asteroid.
What does the alien moon people think about that?
And it's a very expensive hobby. When you say hobby, some of these guys have some antennas and some radios. You're talking six figures,
And are they still hobbying, are they still doing it, ham radio and stuff?
Yeah, and so you can get into areas like, from one extreme, I kind of started out, not by my own will, being in QRP, low power.
Right.
There's some guys that that's all they'll do, is because it's a game to them. They want to see how far they can talk with just 3 or 4 watts. They're not interested in running. I could run up to 2,000 watts with the license I have. So I can talk, when you're talking to some of these places, you need that kind of power. But it's a game to them and a big hobby for them to see if they can talk from here to Australia with 5 watts. If you can pull that off, you have some real bragging rights. And so they do nothing but QRP. And of course, when you're down at that low power, it's probably going to be a lot of Morse code, because now you're talking about your signal is down in the noise, And so a lot of people that operate QRP will operate with Morse code. But at the higher frequencies, where you can actually bounce a signal off the moon and things, that's just crazy. So it's a very broad thing. And then they have ways of actually digitizing things and sending digital information. They call it packet. So that's where the computer stuff comes in. When I was in ham radio, really thick into it, there was no computers back then. Matter of fact, I can remember some of the first computers that came out. We used them on our ham radio, but it was like a toy. I can remember there was a thing called the Sinclair, and it had like a little bitty keyboard on it and like a little 16K RAM thing that you plugged in the back. But you could program that thing to where it could take the Morse code off your speaker and it would decode it.
Oh, wow.
And tell you what it's, if you were kind of lame and didn't want to decode it with your brain, right? But that's just using the computer as a toy. And that's kind of the way computers were when I first ran into them. No one was thinking about using them for desktop publishing or spreadsheets or things that are used in the workplace. When the computers first came out, we were playing games on them and things like that, or using them to do something like that, decode your Morse code. I'm thinking about computers like the Commodore 64, those kind of computers. So, but as things evolved, computers have gotten into ham radio, so you can communicate via your computer using packet. It's still pretty slow compared to what it is over the internet, but it is possible.
Did you work on like disasters? Because I
never got into that. I did a little bit of what they call nets. I wasn't really a member of one, but the guy that was the, club sponsor of the Boy Scout Explorer Post, Albert Fisher, he was on a net called the Gulf Coast Hurricane Traffic Net. Okay. And so that you would be proficient, if there ever was an emergency, they would practice. like every week or
so. Power does go down during these hurricanes. Does that when ham radio?
That's whenever it would come into play. And I can remember doing. You could do things like telegrams, like a telephone. Mm-hmm. A telephone could come in. You've got a box on your ham radio that will patch the telephone into your ham radio. So you could be the connection, because if the telephone lines are down in between you and point B, you can have the telephone come into your radio, use your radio and another ham radio at that location, and then tie into the telephone there.
That
Called a
makes-
phone patch.
Yeah.
So you could do phone patches, and they would practice those things on the net on a regular basis, like every week. They would all check in. Most of the time, there wasn't any traffic to handle, but you can handle like messages where someone's maybe trying to get a message to a loved one. Maybe it's just a written message. You could give this message over the air to another ham radio operator that's on that location to forward that message to the person. Or if the telephones are working to some degree, you could do it via a phone patch. They could actually talk to each other. So
See, that's kind of magical, actually, because I don't think most people know that.
Right.
Oh, the lines are all down. What do we do? And you could still...
ham radios can still get through. Wow. And a lot of those things, you do those communications on certain frequencies based on the need. That's one of the things about being able to get on a lot of different frequencies. The frequency you're on kind of determines the distance that you can talk. And so like on close communications, like the Gulf Coast, you want to get on a lower frequency, like 3 megahertz is where those guys were. The higher that frequency gets, I mean, you can talk from here to Australia, which might be something you might want to do. There was one band in there, we call it the 20-meter band, that was good for pretty much all around. If you're wanting to talk long distances away, it's like the higher the frequency you got until the point that it just started going through the ionosphere, we get on the 10-meter band. That was a very good band to be on for long distance. But that was one of those bands where, since you are, depending on the ionosphere to help you with the communication, it can go out just like that. I mean, you can be talking to Australia like we're talking now, and 5 minutes later, it's nothing but a bunch of hiss. And so it's very dicey on some of those frequencies.
So why is that?
The sunspot happens or something, or any kind of thing like that messes with the ionosphere, and it messes with your ability
Starlink going over or something? Or
so whenever that other, the 20-meter band was really good, it never was great at anything. It was just good all around. Yeah. You could talk far distances. You might have to turn the power up a little bit, but it never would drop out like the 10-meter band would. There were some times, depending on the sunspot saga, you wouldn't hear anything on the 10-meter band. I mean, it was just, except for just local stuff.
Yeah.
You would pick that frequency that you wanted based on what you're trying to do. And say like, for the emergency when the space shuttle disaster happened,
Columbia.
That's going to be on the real higher frequencies because it's going to be very localized. And so you could go out into the woods with these handheld radios that may be VHF or UHF and be able to communicate because you're outside the range of a cell phone.
Yeah.
There's no towers out there. So you could do communications like that and help the responders communicate to a base camp where there's no other communications out there. In some remote areas, law enforcement, their radios probably don't work out there. Mm-hmm. And so if you get out there in the woods, and that's the other thing about the pine trees, they do have a tendency to diffract those higher frequencies.
Where were you when Columbia came down?
I was actually asleep, and I remember the sonic boom woke me up. Yeah, I mean, we live in an old house, and it kind of, resonates with those sonic booms like that.
Did you know what it was?
No, didn't know what it was at first.
How long did it take you to find out?
It was probably about an hour before I realized what it was. Yeah. And some of the pieces were just right down the street practically. They were downtown. So they were in walking distance. Back behind Commercial Bank, there was a big piece. I remember they were guarding it by the time we got down there to look at it. But yeah, there were ham radio operators that were involved in that. I never got into that part of ham radio. Like I said, I was mainly interested in learning the electronics, learning what made it tick. And the big thrill for me was what we call talking DX, and that's to see how far away you can talk. I really like that. And
so what was the furthest you ever talked?
It was probably Australia, because that's about as far as you can talk. I mean, it's like on the other side of the planet. And we collected those things called QSL cards, postcards. So I've got QSL cards from all over the world from talking on, because I was...
Oh, so you talk to them and then they send you...
You exchange cards. I had a card, a postcard, and, it was easy in the United States. I'm kind of dating myself because I don't even know if they have some of these things anymore. Because times change, and I haven't really been active in ham radio in a while. But if you were trying to exchange QSL cards with someone internationally, that could be a problem, the postage and all that. So the ARRL had a thing called the Bureau, and you would QSL via the Bureau. And so you would send your cards to the bureau.
Oh, and they would.
And they're collecting them for you, and they would forward them to you on occasion. So, yeah, that was something that was going on back then, the QSLB of the bureau. But I have a bunch of cards just from the United States, because that was easy to do.
Has there ever been any movies made about this kind of stuff?
About ham radio? I've seen it on some movies. It wasn't about ham radio itself, but I've seen movies.
Wasn't there a Jodie Foster movie or something?
That's right. And she's talking to like someone that was dead on the ham radio.
Yeah.
I've seen some movies like that where they will have a ham radio. And, it was funny because I was just watching an A-Team episode the other day. We've talked about the A-Team before and some of the, actors from those.
Hey, fool.
Yeah, the A-Team. And it was the one where they were having a taxi cab war or whatever. And sure enough, they showed the guy in there, and he's playing like he's the dispatcher for the taxis. And the radio that's sitting there was a Yaesu FT101. I mean, I recognized it. That was a ham radio. Yeah, Yaesu.
Do you ever watch science fiction movies and go, oh, my God, they just got a bunch of old junk there?
Yeah. And sometimes on Hogan's Heroes, the radios they would have in there, I recognize some of the models, some of the old school stuff, the Collins. But I still have quite a few ham radios. I actually collect some that were. It's weird what you collect. I can remember I was having trouble with that kit that I built, the first one, the HWA.
Do you still have that first one you built?
No, I sold that one. Yeah, sad days. But one of the go-to guys here in town was John Jenkins. He had a business here in town, and he spelled his name Jinkins, so it was those Jenkins. John Jenkins had a business in town. He was the two-way radio dealer, Motorola. And, this is going back a few years. You may not remember this, but the Catholic Church used to be on North Street, there north in Mims.
Yeah.
There where Texas State Bank is. Okay, that's where the Catholic Church was. And back behind there, right now it's just a vacant lot. There was a metal building there where he had his two-way radio business. And there was a tall tower, probably over 100-foot tower back there. And that's where his business was. Well, he lived right around the corner. He lived over around the corner there on North Fredonia, kind of where the cable company is. Matter of fact, I think the cable company at some point
and the telephone company was right there or something. That
it's
building?
Further down, further north. Okay. Yeah, so it's south of that, kind of almost down to where the hotel is where John Jenkins lived there on North Fredonia. So I go over there, and I guess because he was in that business, the most expensive ham radio you could get back when I was in ham radio was the Collins. The guy that had Collins Radio, Art Collins, was building radios for the military, and he was a ham radio operator. So he would sell these radios to ham radio operators, but you can imagine anything that's built to mil spec. I mean, it cost more than a car back in those days. And so no one could afford the Collins S-Line. And I go over to John Jenkins' house, and he's just got... He had the entire S-Line, which was all, separate transmitter, receiver, and all the accessories, just had the whole... And of course, I walk into his ham shack, what you call it was just a room in his house, and just, like state of shock. He's got all this Collins stuff. So back when I was in ham radio, that was the holy grail of ham radio, was to have a Collins radio. And I never could afford one. So then...
What do you think happened to that room and all those things?
I have no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you said there was somebody named Brazel or something that you were...
Basil Barbie. I was going to tell you. Yeah, Basil was one of those guys that's like a genius kind of guy. And very intelligent, one of the Mensa, And I just heard stories. I'd seen him do some things that was kind of crazy. But, I'll tell you one thing he did. I was looking at a magazine. It's called QST magazine, okay? It's published by...
Very popular magazine.
ARRL. It's their official magazine, and there was an article in there on a keyer, because if you're into Morse code and you're sending it with what we call the straight key, the thing that you've always seen where they just do, you can only do that so fast. I mean, you get up past 20 words a minute. I mean, you really get... So you can actually make this thing electronic, and you have just two paddles. And one paddle, it does the dashes, da, da, da. The other paddle does the dits, dit, dit, dit. And you've got a controller on there where you can speed it up. I mean, you can get up there 40, 50 words a minute easy with his keyers. So this magazine article was about a keyer, and I was going to build this keyer. And so I was going to do it old school. I was going to go get the parts and put it all together and all this. And I was going to impress Basil with it. By this time, I'd kind of had a relationship with him because I was in a ham radio. He knew I was in a ham radio. I was looking for all these parts, and I would talk to him periodically. And So I was going to show him this key and see what he thought about it. And he gets the magazine article, and bear in mind, this is a technical article about electronics where they're describing, and he does this number here with it. And I said, he's just messing with me. He didn't really read that. Yeah, nobody can read something that fat. And then he started critiquing. He says, well, if I'd have done it, I'd have done so-and-so, so-and-so. And I'd been reading this article for weeks. I'd probably read it a dozen times or more and studied it like I'm, studying for a test or something. So I knew that article forwards and backwards. And when he started critiquing it, I knew he really did read it. And I was just freaking out. I said, no, how could he do that? But then I heard stories about him. He was actually... during World War II, he was in some group. It was like civilian service, working with the military, civilian contractor. And they were doing stuff back then where they were building sensors into a helmet that would detect your brain waves and like control circuits. He was working on that stuff back in the 40s. Okay?
Wow.
And so
he's from Nacogdoches?
I think originally he was from maybe Crockett or somewhere. I'm not sure where but he grew up in Nacogdoches.
Right.
Matter of fact, went to school. I've got pictures of him from way back, when he was in a band and things like that, playing in a band. But, they were doing all this crazy stuff. He had patents and all this kind of thing back then. But one of the stories I heard, and this is pretty funny, he comes out and he's going to college on the GI Bill at SFA. And you can imagine he's bored with some of these classes, bored out of his wits because he already knew this stuff.
Yeah.
And as the story goes, he was sitting there in this chemistry class, and the professor's up there just getting with it. Had some whole chalkboard just full, trying to solve this, balance these equations and all this stuff. And he looks back there, and old Basil's just not even paying any attention at all. So the instructor was going to embarrass Basil. He says, "All right, Mr. Basil, you come up here and you finish this thing off." So he kind of wakes up, kind of sees what's going on. He walks up to the chalkboard and he grabs 2 pieces of chalk. And starts doing this number here.
Wow.
And finishes it off, puts the chalk down, and, that's kind of backfired on the instructor. And the instructor is just sitting there like in a state of shock, He says, "Okay, class dismissed." Sends them all home.
It's crazy to write with
like
both
the
hands.
Leonardo da Vinci type thing, and where he's solving this. Yeah. So I heard. I didn't see that myself, but I heard. Yeah, he was very smart.
So where did all this stuff lead you in your life?
It's kind of weird because I started working at Sparks TV when I was in high school. Actually, Basil recommended me for that job. Okay, so started working at Sparks TV when I was in high school, my senior year. And so I definitely had that interest in, electronics. So I was going to, as soon as I graduated, I was going to go to SFA. And the closest thing to electronics at SFA was physics, okay? And so I, signed up to be a physics major. And I guess it was my sophomore year. I knew the dean of the College of Science and Math. At the time, it was Glenn Clayton. And we all went to the same church out there at Fredonia Hill. And, it was taking me forever at the pace I was going because I was working part-time. I wasn't a full-time student. I think the most I'd taken maybe was 9 hours. I did, that first semester, I got credit for like 12 hours. That might help. But I was usually taking maybe, 3 courses. So I said, man, it's taking forever. And because during the summertime, I would work full-time at Sparks. A lot of TV installations, antenna installations to do during the summer. So I'd work full-time during the summer to help pay, for working part-time during the regular semester. So I was going to take some summer classes, and I took this one class. It was a math class, and the way it was being presented, I won't name any names, it was very theoretical. And I was, as a physicist, for us, mathematics was just a tool. We weren't interested in all the theory, proven proofs and all that. So I wasn't getting much out of the class. So I went in to drop the class. So I go into the dean's office to drop it. He said, "Blackburn, what are you dropping this class for?" I said, "Man, I need to work over here." He says, and an incident had happened there in the science building. They had a piece of equipment that had gone down. They had to bring in some guy from Houston to fix it, and he charged them $150 an hour. This is back in the early 80s, $150 an hour from the time he left Houston. Guy gets there, didn't know what he was doing. It just all went sideways. And so they saw the need that they needed to have someone on staff to repair the scientific equipment and that kind of thing. So he offers me a job. And so, so I start working for SFA. This was in 83. And the deal was I could take 6 hours a semester, and I'm working full time. I'm 40 hours a week employed. So again, it didn't speed things up, but the income was a lot better. And then I wised up and I says, I'm going to start taking some night classes. They didn't say anything about I couldn't take night classes. I actually got it up. Some semesters I would take 9 or 12 hours, but I was I was double major, physics and math. And so I didn't set any records. I mean, it took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. And then I said, well, I may as well get a master's degree while I'm here. So I do a master's degree in physics. So it took another 7 years. I had to get a few extensions in there. So after I got my coursework done, I looked up and I says, I may as well retire from this place. I mean, I was vested in the retirement.
So you were working the whole time?
Working the whole time. They were basically paying my way through school the way I looked at it. I can retire from this place. So I worked longer. And so my career was basically in electronics. I was repairing the scientific equipment. And I can remember, talking about the computers, it got to where at the end I was also in charge of a lot of computers. Because when I first got in there in those early 80s, I can remember some of the first computers that came in the door. I should have killed them because they bred like rabbits. I mean, it went from having just a few computers in the building. When I retired, there was several hundred that I was in charge of, keeping up. So
punch cards kind of thing?
Well, there were, I got into the first computer class I took over there. It was already, tape. We had a terminal, a smart terminal that we were talking to the mainframe with, but it was pretty archaic compared to what it got to at the end. But what was funny about it was I was on TRS, and I can remember when I first started, back then it wasn't even called human resources. They weren't that sophisticated. It was just personnel. The personnel director was telling me all the great things about TRS. Here I am, 20 years old, and this guy's telling me about retirement. I just couldn't picture myself being on the front porch in a swing, retired. And here I am, about to turn 65. But anyway, it went in one ear and out the other. He's talking about how great it was. Anyway, I got started on that, and so I was on TRS, and after I started looking at the retiring, I called over there to Human Resources, and the lady that was in charge of Human Resources for the retirees was Billy Baggett. And I remember calling her up and says, Billy,
is her?
Yeah. I said, Billy, I need to come over there and fill out my paperwork to retire. She said, Philip, you're too young to retire. I said, well, I've been reading the fine print, and it's just your age plus your years of service equals age. And I had cheated on it a little bit. They had a deal in there for a little while where you could buy years of service. And I actually had purchased 3 years of service. And so there I was 49. I had, 31 years of service.
Wow.
Hit the rule of 80.
Yeah.
And she says, Philip, you're the youngest person to ever retire. I've been working over here in Human Resources for decades. You're the youngest person to ever retire from SFA. I said, well, I don't know about that. But I went ahead and retired. So I retired at 49. And the main reason was because I had something else to do, and that was the radio tracking transmitters. I hadn't said much about that other than to say that's where this thing comes full circle.
Right.
Because I'm building these circuits now for the radio tracking transmitters. We track wildlife. It's a ham radio circuit that I saw, all those years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean,
Oscillator, tiny, right?
Oscillator with an amplifier. It's like, it's to see how small you can build it. But as far as the circuit itself, I saw that circuit when I was studying for my ham radio license back in the mid-'70s. Yeah. So it's come full circle as far as that kind of thing. And it's transmitting Morse code. It just goes beep, beep. It's like the letter E.
Yeah.
Over and over again. And now you can modulate the signal. One of the projects, I was building these transmitters at SFA, and no one within the biology department was doing any radio tracking. This kind of happened by accident. I was just sitting there, and the phone rang, and there was this project going on. Usually with these big radio tracking projects, where they're tracking hundreds of animals. In this case, it was quail. It's usually a consortium. There's usually someone that's an expert on the subject, and so there's a wildlife biologist who knows everything there is to know about quail. Mm-hmm. Quail, if you're wanting to have a population of quail on your property, it's probably not going to happen unless you change something. Their habitat's been impacted by a lot of things. back in the World War II era, there were quail all over the place, but there were a lot of these little small farms. They like that habitat. Well, when that all goes away and you got fire ants and everything else, if you're going to have quail on your property, you're probably going to have to manage it. You're going to have to control the predators and create an environment that's conducive to having quail. So you need somebody that understands that. There's a wildlife biologist. Then you have to have somebody that has a lot of money, which is, in this case, it was Temple Inland. It was over at the Boggy Slough. They had the property. They had the resources to bring back the quail. And then you need a source of cheap labor. In that case, it's college students. And so the forestry department was involved. And the guy was having trouble with his transmitters. And someone in the forestry department had said, we'll call that Blackburn guy over in the physics department. Maybe he can help you. So sure enough, I get this call, and I was just infatuated that somebody was actually putting these transmitters on animals and tracking them. I mean,
So these are putting on live animals?
Yeah,
on
quail.
Okay.
And I guess I knew it was possible, but I'd never met anyone that had done it. And so I was just kind of intrigued, I said, yeah, sure, come over and show. Well, this guy was a wildlife biologist who knew a little bit about electronics. And so, and I was the other way around. I was an electronics guy who knew a little bit about wildlife biology. So he drew out the circuit, and of course I started critiquing it. Well, you should have done this, you should have done that. And one thing leads to another, I start building the transmitters for him. So that's how I kind of got started in it, was with quail, which is a game bird. There's a lot of different areas you get into. Another area is things that are threatened or endangered. You can actually get money from the government to study those kind of things. Probably we can't get any money from the government to study quail. That's strictly private, people who like hunting quail and that kind of thing. And so I was building the transmitters on the side when I was working at SFA, and no one in the biology department was even doing anything with radio tracking. And so then somebody got interested in doing that. There was some new blood that came in the department, and when they found out that I could build them, well, then the light bulb came on. They wanted me to build some of the transmitters for them. So I started building some transmitters for them, and one of the guys was real interested in snakes, so I was building these snake transmitters. And it was funny because they had purchased some snake transmitters before they knew I was building them, and you take a snake that's long and skinny, you would think that the transmitter should be long and skinny. Well, the transmitters they got were short and fat, and it just like killed the snake. I don't know what these people were thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And so they asked me, he says, what do you think the smallest transmitter is you could build, like cross-sectional? And so I did some thing. I said, I could probably build it about maybe the cross-sectional diameter of a pencil. Boy, their eyes got big. Oh, yeah, let's do this. So I built this transmitter, and it had the batteries were there was a row of batteries. There had like 5 batteries in a row, and then the little circuit board at the end.
Did it have to move like a snake?
Well, this snake was probably 3 or 4 feet long, so, it didn't move.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's solid.
Okay.
But hopefully it wouldn't affect the snake. That's the kind of thing you have to make sure you don't do something that's going to dramatically affect its behavior, or it's not going to act the same. So the way that you attach a transmitter to a snake, you can't just glue it to them or something like that because they shed their skin and all. I mean, you have to actually do surgery on the snake. And so you have to anesthetize the snake. And what people in this field do to anesthetize the snake is they inject them with ketamine, this thing that, it's a drug from the 60s. This, psychedelic drug from I think that guy, the actor, did too much ketamine. I mean, it's popular.
Matthew, yeah.
Yeah, it's still popular today with people doing ketamine. Now, for a person, they behave a certain way when they take ketamine, but for a snake, you inject it with ketamine. What happens, it starts getting real lethargic. It kind of loses its sense of equilibrium. It'll start rolling over. Because what you want to do when you're cutting the snake, you don't want it jerking or something like that. I mean, because you got a real sharp scalpel, it could kill the snake. And it's got a real slow metabolism, so you have to be real careful because, it's the drug is slow to act on them. So you may inject them and you may have to come back an hour. I mean, it's a long time before they get into a state that you can actually handle them. Cut them.
Is it on their back or on their stomach that you're cutting?
It's kind of midway. Yeah, it's you go into through the muscle wall and you implant it, and then you have this long antenna. So you don't want to make a long incision for the length of the antenna. You use what's called a trocar, and it's a hollow tube. And so you make a little incision down here, and you slide the tube under the skin all the way up here, and then you feed the antenna into it, and then when you pull the trocar out, the antenna then is under the skin.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we didn't have the license for ketamine. That's a controlled substance. And whereas the U.S. Forest Service, they had guys over there that were studying snakes, and they were doing surgeries on snakes. I'm talking about the building that's on the campus, the SFA campus over there by the forestry department. Right. So we coordinated with them that we were going to do the surgery on the snake over there. They were going to assist with the surgery, actually do the surgery. They were showing us how to do it. So we go over there, and we're doing all this stuff with the snake. And, of course, these guys that study the snakes are known as herpetologists, so the herpetologists are in there. Well, the guy that was director, he comes in just to see what's going on, and he spots that transmitter, and he starts really looking at it, eyeballing it. And he said, Philip, he said, how much do you think that transmitter would weigh if it just had one battery? Because he noticed how small the circuit board and all that was, and how small the cross-sectional diameter was on the transmitter. He'd never seen anything that small. So I don't know, Ron Thiel was a director. I said, I don't know, Ron, I've never built one, just one battery, but I can build one up and see. He said, well, I'll tell you why. He says, we're studying these threatened and endangered bats, and under law, since it's threatened or endangered, we can only add so much weight to the bat. It's like 3%. And the smallest transmitter on the market right now is 0.35 grams, and that's too heavy. I mean, we have a list of bats as long as my arm that we want to study that we can't study because the transmitter is too heavy, and we can't get a permit. They won't award make an exception. So, okay, well, I'll build one up and see what it is. So the next day I go over there and build one up, just put one battery on it, and get it going. I go in there and measure it, and it came in like at 0.25 grams.
Wow.
And this is kind of like racing cars where, when you get down to this real low, I mean, just 0.3 grams would have been crazy, but 0.25 was like blow the lid off of it. So I call back and I said, hey, Ron, I built that thing up and it came in at 0.25 grams. Oh, no, that can't be right. He says, go measure it again. That can't be right, I says, Ron, I measured it on a scale that goes out 8 decimals. You want all 8 decimals? That was like 0.24 something. It was actually 2.24 something, He says, how many of those can you have ready next week? Because they were right in the middle of a project. They were studying some bats up at the Ouachita National Forest, and they needed really lightweight transmitters for all these species of bats that they were trying to tag and monitor. So I got into this niche market of the really tiny stuff. I kind of invented it. Yeah. Basically, I invented the 0.25 gram transmitter. They'd never seen anything like it. So he invited me to a conference. It was up in Hot Springs. That's close to where the Ouachita National Forest is. They were having a bat conference up there. He says, Philip, we're having this conference. He says, you need to come up here, and we have a session there where there's posters, and vendors will have tables in there to, show people their wares. He says, you're to come up there and with your 0.25 gram transmitter and show it to these people. And nobody even knows it exists. So, that was close enough to drive. So I said, sure. So we attended the conference, my wife and I, and we set up a table in there. I went through a stack of business cards. Probably 100 business cards, passing out cards to these people because it was funny. I attended a couple of the sessions where people were, discussing their publication. Mm-hmm. And some of them, the whole PowerPoint was about the fact that the smallest transmitter you get was 0.35 grams. And here they find out at this conference that there's a 0.25 gram transmitter. So you're all the time apologizing. I'm sorry about my slide. It's outdated. I just found out yesterday there's a 0.25 gram transmitter out there. I'm still getting orders from that. And that's been 20 years ago. Wow. It's been a long time ago.
So what does it transmit? Their location or...
Yeah, it's like a beacon.
Okay.
It just.
So they just know where they're going and where.
That's right. It emits like a 20 millisecond pulse at this frequency, and each one's on its own unique frequency in a certain band. A lot of people use 150 to 152 megahertz. The federal government uses like 164, 166. It kind of depends on who it is and what you're tracking. Mm-hmm. On these bat transmitters, a lot of people are using 172 megahertz. So you have this band, but each transmitter will be on a unique frequency. Now, they can only be so close together because when you tune them in, you want to make sure that they're spaced out far enough because you don't want to hear another one that's close by. It kind of bleeds through, right. So you space them at least 10 kilohertz apart. So you may have one at 150.000. Well, the nearest one should be like 150.010. That way they're not going to interfere. So you space them out adequately so they're not, interfering with each other.
So they're on snakes, they're on bats. What else?
Well, I've tracked all kinds of things. Probably the smallest thing that I've ever tracked was a dragonfly. Yeah.
I told you so.
Yeah, the dragonfly.
We used to see
That was up in
dragonfly all the time.
This was a project that was up on the northeast. It's a tiger spike-tailed dragonfly that actually migrates. Most dragonflies, they live and die within 100 meters of where they're hatched. This thing here migrates down the East Coast. They knew where it started, where it ended up, but they didn't know how it got there, and they wanted to know. And so I think there were several people involved in that one. I think there was an ecological research firm that was involved in it. There was Princeton was involved in it, and you need a source of cheap labor and somebody with some money because they tracked it with a helicopter. Yeah.
Wow. So are all of them surgically implanted? I thought when you first started, I'm like, yeah, they strap it on the back and there it goes. But it's not that way.
It depends on what it is you're trying to track. Like I say, with a snake, there's no way to really glue it to them or try to tether it to them, or say you have to do surgery and implant it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I know there were some snakes where if it was a certain specific type of research they were doing, they would actually feed it to the snake if it was a big enough snake. Especially if it was about to go into hibernation or something. You wanted to know where it was going to hibernate. Depends on the data you want, but on a lot of things, you're pretty much have to do surgery on them, to get the transmitter. Other animals, you can figure out some way to tether it to them, like you're talking about, a harness of some kind. A lot of the bird transmitters that I build, they're tethered to the bird with some kind of harness. And typically the harness material will break down at some point on its own. It's not like they're going to be wearing this thing forever. The material will degrade and it will fall off at some point.
Yeah.
Other things, especially like with the bats, what they were wanting to know about the bats was where the bat was roosting, okay? Mm-hmm. And stupid me, when I first was thinking about bat transmitters, I'm thinking about Batman, I'm thinking about, bats living in a cave or something. I thought all the bats were living in caves, but it turns out there's a bunch of bats just live out there in the woods. They live in the cavity of a tree, or they just hang out on the branches. They don't
the roof of my house.
Don't necessarily have to live in a cave, So with these bats, and this is where things like ecological research firms come in. Some of these bats are threatened, endangered. Let's say that the government wants to build a road, all right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear about these things where they have to do an ecological survey.
You got to make sure,
because there's no telling what's in this area where you're about to plow through there and build this road. So there will be a firm contracted to come in and do an assessment of what is out there. And part of that is to do the tagging. These bats, they roost during the day and they come out at night. And so they're, nocturnal. And the way you catch a bat is they're out there foraging for food or whatever. But when they are thirsty and want to get something to drink, they skim over a stream or something and get some water. You can put up a mist net there and catch them.
Wow.
And so you'll catch this bat and you'll tag them with a transmitter and then come out the next day and figure out where the thing's roosting. And so you'll find
do we have to anesthetize them or whatever? No.
With the bat, a lot of times if you're going to just attach something, because a bat transmitter, you may want data for a week, maybe 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. If you just wanted to know where it was roosting one time, it just lasts one day, that's enough for you. But if you want to see if they're coming back to the same roost over and over again, you might want to get more data, like a couple of weeks worth of data. So you need some type of adhesive that's going to last maybe a couple of weeks. Now, a lot of times when you're just attaching a transmitter to an animal that's a short-lived time period, the adhesive can be something as simple as super glue. You just super glue it to the animal, and just the moisture out there in the environment starts kind of breaking it down, and after a couple of weeks, it just falls off. Turns out a bat doesn't tolerate super glue very well. I don't know if you've ever messed around with super glue, but if you've ever glued your fingers together with super glue accidentally, it's an exothermic reaction. It gets hot. And that heat can actually blister the skin of a bat, so it's undesirable. So they use skin bond, which is something like ostomy patients wear when they're gluing things to the skin.
Yeah.
Anytime you want to glue something to your skin, you can use a different adhesive than super glue. So they will shave a little area on the bat's back because you don't want it to be able to remove pull it off. Shave a little area back there and glue it on there with some skin bond. And it's short-lived as well. It won't stay on there forever.
Yeah.
And so, but it stays on there long enough that they can get the data they're trying to get. Are they going back to the same roof site over and over again? If they just need one night's data, that's they just get it the one night, and then it just falls off, and they don't worry about it.
Who knew that a little ham radio was going to lead you down this path?
Exactly right. I mean,
And you live in Nacogdoches, and yet you're getting transmitters on things all over the world.
yeah,
Kinda?
it's
Is that
really
right?
weird. It was funny. The first international stuff that I had came from those bats. I was at that conference, and part of the conference was a field trip out to the study site. And so they were going to load us up on a school bus, haul us all, had sack lunches all packed. And well, the guy I'm sitting next to on the school bus is a guy from Japan, Hirokawa. And I'm sitting there on the bus, and he spoke pretty good English, pretty thick accent. Anyway, we start talking, and he had seen the transmitter. He said, 0.25 grams. He says, that's the smallest transmitter in the world. I says, how can that be? I mean, most of these parts come from Japan. He says, no one in Japan builds one that small.
Wow.
So he went back to Japan and told all of his colleagues about this 0.25 gram transmitter, and I probably have about a dozen customers over in Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, from just that one contact. Then there's been other transmitters like in Costa Rica. That's another hotspot for radio tracking research is in Costa Rica. Then there's stuff up in Canada, of course, and then there's a lot of stuff over in Europe. Actually, when COVID hit, it had a dramatic impact on the radio tracking transmitter business because a lot of this stuff I'm talking about, the research money that's out there for the endangered, threatened things, when COVID hit, they flipped the switch, and unless the research had something to do with COVID, then there just wasn't enough money to go around. I mean, this is a pandemic. I mean, it's killing people. So the resources were focused on COVID, and so there was no money for doing much radio tracking research. So, as far as the big projects. Now, you have professors at universities that are doing smaller projects just with the local funds. That was still there, but the bigger projects kind of went on a hiatus for a while. And it didn't seem like it affected the European market as bad as it did here for some reason. Maybe they weren't doing the kind of research on COVID. They might not had the capacity to do that. I mean, we were the ones that were building the ventilators and all that stuff. I mean, we pretty much led the charge on the research about COVID and trying to resolve that. So, there's quite a few transmitters that are going to Europe. And during COVID, I probably sold more transmitters to Europe than I did here, which was kind of weird.
So one final question, and this is contemporary things. What do you think about data centers, and what are they? And should we be frightened of them?
Yeah, the data centers, that's the thing with me, since I'm into electronics, where I look at things probably differently than a lot of people. I can remember one professor up there, he was out of the history department, and they had called me over to the liberal arts building to look at a TV. It was like a projection TV. This is back in the day when, the biggest screen you could get with these big things you roll around. Yeah. It was a rear projection TV with a VCR, and the sound wasn't working. And it was like a
red, green, blue.
Yeah.
Projection.
It's like a major catastrophe. The sound wasn't working. There's a room full of people and all this. You come over here as an emergency, and I get over there. And it turns out somebody had flipped a switch on the back of it, to run external speakers. And so, you flip the switch, and they all feel like idiots, but I remember what he said. He says, man, that electricity is a tool of the devil. And so I know there's this thing that's out there that's a resistance to electronics. I've seen it all my life, when there's something new, even something as simple as the calculator. I can remember the way the calculator was accepted by the schools. It was like, oh, we don't want them using a calculator. They're not going to know how to do it.
Yeah.
They're not going to know how to do it by hand and all this. And so there was a lot of resistance to use it, implementing the calculator into the classroom because it was going against the grain of the way we had always done it,
Yeah.
And I see, like with the data centers, there's some of that going on, that there's this, instant knee-jerk reaction to be against it because, it's like, oh, they're, going to use water, they're going to use electricity or whatever. But at the same time, you have to view it from, the mile-high view. Actually the satellite view, I mean, we're in a race, worldwide with other countries when it comes to electronics, like China, all these other countries out there. And this thing with artificial intelligence, that's all basically electronic. I mean, there is no artificial. I mean, it's code, okay?
Is it ones and
It's ones and zeros, and it's like, how fast can you do these things? Because that's where the artificial intelligence comes into play. Is you're basically sorting through a lot of data and running algorithms on it, and you got to do it like at lightning speed. And so that's where this thing about the speed of it comes into play, and the chips that are made to do this thing really fast. It's something as simple as writing a document. Chat GPT or where you're going to get this computer to construct this essay for you, and construct it in a way that maybe people can't tell that it's not you. You give it some instructions, but just to be able to do something like that, the resources of scanning all these documents that are out there and being able to create that. I mean, it's unless you were willing to wait a month or two for it. I mean, you want it like yesterday. And so this idea that you got to do these algorithms and this processing like at lightning speed, this is what's involved in this thing. And so data centers is just a part of that. So for me, this is just, same old, and now there are
what about the noise that people worry about?
That's the thing. I mean, I've got a nightclub over here that I can hear at my house at 2 a.m. I mean, it's like, I don't know, any kind of noise it would make, I'm sure by building the building properly, you can control the noise. I mean, if it's just...
You would think if you could make artificial intelligence, you
can build a building that's noise
quiet.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can build a soundproof room in a recording studio, and you could fire a gun in there and they wouldn't hear it anywhere, So I don't think noise is wrong. I think it's legitimate when they talk about things like water.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in an area where water is scarce, then that's a concern for sure. Or power, and for me, as the physical, you got oceans out there, not a short supply of water out there. I mean, you may have to transport it. I mean, there's plenty of water. Power for me is the bigger thing that you're going to be dealing with something that drains a lot of power, That's why I think on these ones where I think it's over 100 megawatts or whatever, the facility is going to become its own power generating facility. They're going to do something to generate their own power.
They're using natural gas now too.
Some could use that. I think some of them can get permits to put in nuclear. I mean, it could be whatever power generation they can do, but they're going to be, the hickey's going to be on their neck to come up with the power so that it doesn't affect the grid that's powering what's
in
around
your wallet too, in terms of having to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably going to be subsidized then, I would think.
Okay.
Because they're going to, there'll be some subsidization on that to where they can do this power plant, because it will be hooked to the grid, and any surplus they have is going to help the grid at that point. So, or if there's an emergency, they may shut the thing off and it be the power source. So I kind of look at it from the point of view as this is all part of the technological race. Do we want to lead? Because they're going to build data centers all over China, or if they want them. There's not going to be
don't care about
there's not
that.
going to be any resistance.
Right.
If there is resistance, was it the nail that sticks up will soon be driven in?
Yeah.
If there's some
Cut
resistance,
the poppy off that stands too tall.
if there's some resistance in China to a data center, that's not going to be a problem for them. And so you have to view it from that this is a world race in this field of artificial intelligence, which is we're already using it. And so you have to view it from that view as well, that, there can be some problems. Let's see if we can resolve those problems. But just to have a knee-jerk reaction to we're against all data centers is kind of the extreme, That's the old electricity is the tool of the devil kind of mentality, and just resist it, because it's something new and it's going to change things. I kind of look at it differently. I think we need them. I think if it's done properly, it can be done in a way that everybody's happy with it.
What does properly mean?
You're not impacting the water or the power resources. I mean, you're if it takes a large amount of water to start it out with, like maybe it needs several 100,000 gallons of water or whatever, but it's going to be circulated.
I think it was 18 million is what I read for one of them.
Oh, one of those really huge ones?
Yeah.
Well, the ones they're not going to build one of the really,
but still.
Not going to build one of the really big ones here. That's the thing. I mean, we're off the beaten path. The kind of thing we would get here is not going to be the ones that go on for a mile.
Yeah.
I mean, the really big, the 100 megawatt data centers, I guess you would call it the super data center.
We don't have the flat land to do that.
It's not going to be built here. So if we get some form of a data center, it's not going to be what everybody's really afraid of. It's going to be a much smaller scale. But, if the water, I look at the number one user of water in our community, it's probably Pilgrims. And I mean, they're way further than number two. And so I don't think a data center would outcompete those guys. I mean, like you say, it would be a certain amount that would be circulated, and sure, it's going to lose a little bit, but it'd be this one-time thing. And maybe that could be hauled in. I don't know. But if there is a concern about the water, well, let's address it, If there's concern about the power, address it. And I think on the really big ones, that's what they're looking at doing, have them generate their own power, or you don't get a permit.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You can't build this thing unless you're going to generate your own power. If you're in an area where power is kind of, not enough of it, they're having brownouts or blackouts already, well, then you're probably not going to be able to build one there. So, but as far as the need for them, there's a big need for them because everybody else is going to be doing it.
So when we had, and this is a final thing, I swear I'm going to stop, but when we had the snowpocalypse a few years ago.
Snowmageddon, yeah.
Snowmageddon. Okay. Everybody was talking about the power grid's going to go down. We don't have enough power grid. We need to build new power grid.
Yeah.
Did they know, I'm talking about the people that maybe run this country or something, did they know that we were about to build millions or hundreds of data centers, and that, not that, did they take an opportunity of Snowmageddon to do that?
I don't think so.
I think it's an accident.
Well, what gets me, and I've seen this over and over again, is the way that we do things. You always try to do it.
We try to find an excuse. Well, like, why is it happening?
Well, they always try to do it on the cheap. I mean, I ran into this at SFA with the parking places, because I was faculty staff, and I would come back from lunch and couldn't find a parking place.
Yeah.
And when you peel back the onion, you find out that there's a lot more parking permits than there are parking places, because their mentality is when they're not all going to come up here and park at the same time. So they oversell the number of parking permits because they don't think everybody's going to show up at the same time. Same thing with the telephone. The telephone company was allowed to not put in enough circuits for all the customers because the idea was they're not all going to pick up the phone at the same time. Well, guess what happens in an emergency? They all pick up the phone and it doesn't work, And so the way we've always done things, and that's how our power grid was. They built the power grid, and the design for Texas is all outdoor. Oh, we're never going to get a snowstorm here.
Yeah.
And so it's not even prepared for this snow event that we had. Same thing up north. They have problems with their power plants when it gets too hot. Yeah. I mean, because it's like it's inside or something, and it just goes into meltdown. So it's our approach to things that usually turns biting us in the butt, is that you didn't prepare properly for it. The grid here wasn't designed to withstand an event like that. They didn't think it was ever going to happen, And so when it did happen, then you're playing catch up. I think maybe they're going back. I think like some of the problems they were having, it was like a certain sensor would freeze up, and then the whole thing goes down. And so maybe you need to go back and rethink what you're doing around this sensor. You need to enclose that thing. And so they're going to go back and rethink some of that thing. But it's just the approach to things. They always want to do it, but they never anticipate all the different variables. And that's where somebody is a physicist, the way a physicist approaches things is different than the way an engineer would approach it, And that's why some of the problems we've had with the nuclear power plants, the physicists were the ones that invented it, basically, and then it's turned over to the engineers to try and, design something that benefits humanity or whatever. And it's that approach, I think, is where things break down a lot of times, because they don't, they're using factors in the calculus about like how much it costs or whatever, like how much do we want to overbuild it for? Like if you're building a bridge, well, what's the worst case scenario for how much weight's going to be on it? Maybe we need to overbuild it by a factor of 2. I guess a physicist, overbuild it by a factor of 10. Yeah, I mean,
it's just not having failed.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, worst case scenario, we need to be prepared for it. There's no preparation for worst case scenario in the way a lot of things are done. And so that's why with the nuclear power plants, I mean, this thing is operating at critical, which means that if you lose the cooling, I mean, the thing just runs away. You should operate it at subcritical. Oh, well, that's not as cheap cost. Yeah, we don't make as much money when we operate it like that. We have to put some energy into it to bring it up to critical. If you have the ability to turn it off, that's what you really want with a nuclear power plant. You want to be operating to where you're doing something that brings it up to the level to make it work. But then when you turn it off, it stops.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
instead
the way
of just heating up or doing.
That's the way a physicist thinks about it. But you turn it over to some of these other guys, and it's all about the buck, and how to make the most money.
Yep.
And so they don't ever consider the fact that, the backup to the cooling is going to fail, It says, we've got a remedy for if the cooling system fails, we have a backup one. Well, what if Fukushima, you think about, when a tidal wave comes in and wipes the whole mess out, and the thing goes, it just gets hotter and hotter. I mean, it's like the doomsday machine. I mean, you don't want something.
And it still is, I think.
Exactly. And so you want something that's designed by physics people and not necessarily the engineer that's thinking totally different than the way a physics person would think. And there are some nuclear power plants out there with that design. They've never been built, so they've never been tested. But that's the way I would build a nuclear power plant as a physicist, would be to have it where it's got an off switch. I mean, you hit the switch and it turns off.
Because if it can happen, it will.
That's it. Worst case scenario, you have to think about worst case scenario. And
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on today. It's just amazing. Made in Nacogdoches, right here. We'll see you soon.
There ain't